Now, I have in my head a couple of things that I want to keep in mind. These people have described this man as hostile and violent. And when I said that you can produce any kind of a person you want to in the room, I could make this man very mad very easily. I mean, for instance, a gross example that none of us would ever do, but supposing I walked in the room and I said, how come you haven't taken better care of your kids? What would you expect in the way of a reaction? You would become violently angry. So I'm going to avoid talking about anything in any way that's going to get him mad. Everything I'm saying is going to be in the direction of making sure I talk to him, I talk with him, and I talk in a way that's agreeable and acceptable to him, because I'm not going to get him mad. And you'll see that coming through here. I'm also going to take it easy in terms of this lady. My assumption is that she's taken a back seat because she's been put down a lot by the people who have worked with her in terms of why haven't you taken better care of your kids, why haven't you protected them from this guy. And so I'm going to go very cautious and very easy with her and give her an opportunity to tell her story in her words the way she needs to, where she doesn't have to be frightened of my disapproval. Now, those are thoughts in my head, and I'm going to try those out for size and see how they go. In the family therapy field, I've already indicated, is which family you're going to work with. And that's certainly, I think, the case with this particular case, which family you're going to work with. Most of us do have a map in our heads about what a family is. That has to do with our own ideals about what a family should be. And usually in family therapy, that's the family we end up treating, the family in our head. Not all therapists have the same family in their head, although in the family therapy field, most family therapists have a structural family in their head. If you ask a group of family therapists around the world to role play a family, and I've done this in many different countries, almost without exception, they'll role play a standard structural family, where a mother and father are in conflict, and the mother is over-identified with one of the kids who's angry at the father and rebelling in some way. Norwegians add another element, as I was saying at lunch. They usually have one of the parents from the north and one from the south. It's still a structural family. And we end up trying to treat the family that's in our head. And if that happens to match the families that are in the heads of the people we work with, you're kind of home free. It doesn't make any difference. But the fact is, when it comes right down to the very details of what you're working with, none of the families in our head match the families we work with. It's not the family that's in the father's head, and it's not the family that's in the mother's head, and it's not the family that's in the kid's head. And you need to ask yourself which family you're going to work with. When I said that you can produce any kind of family you want, I was being a little bit crass and perhaps superficial. The family I want to work with is the family that we evolve with each other in the process of conversation in the therapy room. And that family is unique to that conversation in that family. It does not exist in any theory. And I see therapy as the process of co-developing, if you will, a therapeutic reality out of which you work. Yeah. We got it working. Good, thank you. A co-developing a therapeutic reality. And I say co-developing because I want to talk about the fact that we determine each other in the formation of this reality. It should not be determined by the theory of the therapist, nor should it be determined by the theory of the father or the theory of the mother. The responsibility of the therapist is to provide a context within which a reality, a therapeutic reality, can emerge that you can all work with. And it can't be just any old reality. It's got to be a reality in which you can all survive in. It's got to be a reality that I can work in and survive in, the father can work in and survive in, the mother can work in, and the kids can work in, and we can all survive in that work with each other. Too often in therapy, we, on the basis of our theories, create a reality where the people we're working with can't survive. we end up calling them resistant, non-compliant, borderline, and other pejorative diagnoses. Yeah.
What do you mean by a family that you as a therapist can provide them?
It's got to be a reality that I'm comfortable with. For instance, a gross example would be, supposing the father said, look, I don't care what you're up to here, but I want you to fix it so I can screw my daughter and I don't give a damn what anyone says. I could not survive in that reality. Or I want you to help me murder my wife. I could not survive in that reality. It's got to be a reality that I am comfortable in too, because as long as I'm a member of that problem system, I've got to live with it too in my contacts with these people. So it needs to be a reality that's code-developed. It's not just anything goes. We were talking at lunch, and this is one implication of that discussion. I firmly believe that in therapy we need to be able to operate on the basis of our ideals, our values, and our ethics. And we need to be able to modify and change those on the basis of the developing reality that develops, but it has to be a development that I can live in ethically, or I can't be there. I happen to think that one of the advantages of the way of thinking I'm trying to elaborate on this week is it permits you a good bit more flexibility in doing that. It permits you to work with a lot of people, like this group here, that other people can't work with. Because it does not assume that there is any fixed reality, but every reality is a new invention. And I use the word invention on purpose. And it's a co-invention that's developed through the process of conversation with each other, through dialogical processes. That's why I was saying earlier, I've forgotten, was it you that asked, or no, you asked the issue of cognition and cognitive psychology. Somebody back here did. And the problem I have with cognitive psychology in its purest form is that it sees reality as simply being in the head of one person. I see reality as being an intersubjective phenomenon that's co-created constantly through conversation and narrative. I'm not just in one head. And if I'm going to be there, it's got to be a reality that I can work with. So I'm going to talk with these people in a way that we can begin to develop a family that the father can stay in, that I can stay in, the mother can stay in, the kids can stay in, and the workers watching it can stay in too. This family has a lot of problems. But we're not going to get to those problems as long as we're in a fight with each other about whose reality is correct. The fathers, the mothers, the kids, the teachers, etc. Most therapeutic impasses are a struggle, a fight, an argument about whose reality will prevail. That's probably the single most important cause of chronic treatment failure. The family can present themselves, as far as I'm concerned, any way they want to. I'm not going to say, let me get that from the kid, like a lot of family therapists do. As far as I'm concerned, it's their family, it's their presentation, it's their story, and I'll work within that framework. If the father can talk to the kid and the kid's comfortable, that's fine. Another thing I want to point out, you'll notice, I think, some difference here between the way I'm conducting the session and a lot of therapists conduct sessions. A lot of family therapists try to get patients, families, clients to talk to each other. And I'm very actively having them talk with me. And that's part of the clinical implication of this theory. As far as I'm concerned, the point of view that you get people to talk with each other is so that they can kind of do their thing so you can observe it and see what they are, and then you know what needs to change. I want to become an active part of the system, an active part of creating the reality, and play a very central role in terms of managing the conversation in the process of doing this. And so one of the characteristics of the therapy that emanates from this theoretical position is the therapist is a very active participant in the conversation and is constantly responding to, reacting to, questioning, and very, very much speaks more than anybody else in the room. I've defined the role of the therapist as being an expert in maintaining the conversation. That's what therapy is all about. Everything changes in dialogue. If you talk about something, it will not stay the same. That's one of the beauties of language. Anytime you say something, you've defined an infinity of other ways it can be said.
Do you use the concept of intervention?
Less and less. Theoretically, and at a very pure level, I don't. But I haven't yet quite gotten there. But much, much less than I used to. The concept of therapeutic intervention is that you discover what's wrong, and now you know where to provide the corrective action to fix it. And I find that an increasingly less important concept in my thinking. But from a practical point of view, I'm not quite 100% there. Maybe 98, 99. I was trying really hard to not use language that would find problems, because they've been pretty well subject to that, and they're very aware of the fact that if you discover a problem, you're going to blame them for it. So even asking him about school, I didn't ask him how poorly you're doing or what are you flunking. I asked him, what do you like the least? After I asked him, what do you like the best? So that the language I'm using is constantly in terms of what it is they're doing, what it is they're struggling with, not having implications for what I think people should do or shouldn't do with school. They should succeed or shouldn't. But what is happening with them and what are they doing about it? That has an accumulative effect of keeping me from being the person responsible for change. I end up being nothing more than a consultant in their struggle with their life, with the problems that they define, rather than being an expert in what problems are, and therefore having the solutions to them. I said, well, yeah, you've had a lot of problems with hospitals ever since you were 13, because he had told me about being in the hospital from an automobile accident earlier. And they both laughed and said, no, he's been having problems with hospitals since he was 4. And he keeps telling me about how when he was 4 he got hit with a diesel truck, and when he was 6 he got hit by a car. And I said, my God, what do you got against automobiles? You keep running into them. He said, no, it's not just automobiles. I got kicked in the head one time by a donkey. I said, oh, well, good, it's not a prejudice against automobiles. That's fine then. And he laughed, and we carried on. That's really how I was.
You are using a lot of humor.
Very much, yeah. And I think that's just me. I tend to be really humorous sometimes. Because what I just did was a very serious mistake, and you'll see the results of it in a moment, after our coffee. I have been doing pretty good with this family at this point in time, in the sense of being able to move with their narrative, move with their story. I use the word narrative on purpose because I think all of us organize ourselves around metaphorical meaning, narratives, stories that give meaning to our lives. As a matter of fact, it's in the sharing of narrative with each other that we organize our behavior with each other. Through story, through narrative, through metaphor. It's the way that we know how to behave and when to behave. This gets exemplified at multiple levels, up to and including cultural ritual, which is a form of narrative. And I think in therapy, one of the most important single things you can do is find a way to permit people to develop with you a narrative that permits you to work together. But since they're the ones with the problem, the narrative around the problem's got to be theirs, not yours. If you come on too hard with your theory, then you're developing your narrative about what the problem is rather than theirs. And the art of therapy is to be able to participate in that without dominating it. To be part of the co-developing of it without being the without being the owner of it. And this is what happens when you come on with too hard a theoretical line. And I've done a good job here in permitting them to tell a story, to tell their narrative in a way that we're now beginning to feel comfortable with. But I just made a mistake. And it's little mistakes like this that can blow it if you're not aware of that. And what I just said to the man is, and I'll play this so you can see what I just said to the man is, well, tell me now, you're planning to send your son off to this Goodwill shelter. I told you earlier that the child guidance clinic was transferring the oldest son over to the community mental health center because he was beyond the child age. And they were making plans with a local social agency to put this kid in a residential work setting where he could learn some social skills and some occupational skills. The reason it was a mistake is not that that may or may not be what this kid might need or might not be appropriate. The father right along has been telling me that they don't send their kids anywhere, that he wants to participate in the management, and what I just told him was, you're going to send your kid off. That's bound to inflame him. And what it does, unless I can rectify that, is it makes a lie out of everything I've done to this moment in time. And this is, it's on the little things like that that therapy stands or falls, frankly. And it's not that you won't make such mistakes. Let me call it a mistake. It's a pretty naturally occurring thing. I guess all mistakes are. But it's to be able to recognize them and to reverse them quickly so that you can undo the damage you are potentially about to do. And I think that's what you'll see here. He's talking about the fact that when he was a kid, whenever the mother wanted to get rid of him, she'd call the children's people and they would take the kids away for a week or something and they could go play around and do what they wanted to do. That they would frequently send him off to institutions and his brothers too. And that was the way they were using the social service system. It was a way of getting rid of the kids that they found to be a drag and they wanted to go off and play about. And that he's going to do this differently with his family, this group. That's simply not going to happen. I could have been a little more aware of that because at the beginning, you may have missed this, I said, well now, you have family in California. He said, no, my family's here. And he disowned those people in California. Language, at least you're looking into whether they can help you with your son. At least you're looking into it. What is it you think they might be able to help you with? Which is very different than, let me see now, you're about to send your kid off to. It's a very different language, and now we can talk with each other because I'm dealing with the fact that he does want to do something for and with his son. Stelazine did here, and he said, well, the people at school liked it. She was more manageable, meaning she wouldn't tip over the garbage cans and take the food. But she'd just sit around and do nothing. And you may recall an old piece of research that was done back in the 1920s by an educational psychologist. He took a group of behavioral descriptions of kids, and he had a group of teachers pick out the ones that they would rate as examples of pathology. And then he took the same group of behavioral descriptions and had a group of psychologists rate the ones that they would consider to be exemplary of pathology. Well, sure enough, the school teachers rated anything that was an outward nuisance, like making noise, acting uncontrolled, talking out of place, and the psychologists rated things like being quiet to themselves, not talking, which is a little example again of how what pathology is very much dependent on your description of what it is that's a nuisance to you. And I said, well, how come they wanted to put the kids in the hospital?